Hey, you're listening to the Intentional Documentary Podcast. So glad to have you. Around here, I'm gushing over the stories behind the pictures that we freaking love of our own lives. You know, the ones we hold as high value and iconic, because this is where photography meets real life. I'm your host, Marie Moss, and I believe that the best way to approach your photography is through your lens, your way. Through insightful conversations with photographers, I'll explore preserving life with your camera and using what lights you up to grow your brand. Let's get started. Hey, how you doing? Really excited to dive into this one today. First, I want to tell you a little backstory to this particular episode. Last night, I tried to record it and quit on myself at least a half a dozen times. It just wasn't feeling right. I couldn't get out the message that I really wanted to get out and ended up closing my computer and was just going to revisit it in the morning. But then I decided to journal about it. And I don't know, but that journaling stuff is some pretty powerful stuff because stuff just poured out of me, things that I didn't even think when I was sitting here in my little quote unquote studio trying to record. I was even almost in tears at one point because of some of the stuff that came up that was so deep and so personal. And here I am today with a fresh pair of eyes on this stuff and really excited. I think I've got an even better episode than I had intended to begin with for you today. And I wanted to just throw that out there because just because I have this podcast here or you see the Fearless and Framed website and all the stories and content that I share there, I just thought I'd remind y'all that I am human and I struggle with some of the same stuff that you might struggle with when it comes to getting your voice and your message and all that out there. So anyway, enough about me and that story. Here's why you're here today. If you want to experience photos that truly honor the things that matter to you, more of what we covered in episode 1, then this episode is definitely for you. Or if you feel like your photos, your personal work is significantly more intimate than your client work and you want to go deeper with your clients, then this episode is definitely for you as well. What we're going to cover today is clarify what intentional documentary even is to begin with. It's different than what you see in today's mainstream documentary family photography. And we'll also cover why pay attention to this approach for client work, especially. Because this episode is packed with so much goodness, I went ahead and created a mini mag. So if you don't know what a mini mag is, basically I take the pictures that we talk about, the transcript of the episode, all of the links to the examples and resources and stuff that we share and put it in this beautiful magazine that you can follow along with or just look at later on. And to get that, it's free. Go to fearlessandframed.com/intentional documentary podcast and look for episode number 2, or you can text the code 002TREAT to the number 44222 and I got you. I'll send it to you. I promise that you're not going to get a bunch of text messages if you do it that way. It's just a really quick and easy way for us to get your details and then send it on over. So that number again that code again is 002TREAT, and you can text that to the number 44222 to get your hands on that beautiful little mini mag. All right, so let's dive into this thing. The first thing we're going to do is go through this really quick and simple and fun quiz. I know, I'm going to throw some interaction at you, I guess, because I want you to grab a pen and a piece of paper and go through this with me. You may have heard me go through this before, and if that's the case, don't dismiss it. Go through it again because our lives change, I'd say every 3 months or so, and you can go through this with a fresh pair of eyes. I guarantee it. So grab a pen and a piece of paper. If you're driving or you literally cannot grab a pen and a piece of paper, then just come back to this episode later or listen through and just do the exercise later. But either way, hit the pause button if you need a second to get a pen and a piece of paper. All right, I trust that you are prepared. So the next step here, there's only 3 steps, really short and sweet. The first thing you need to do is jot down 3 names of people who are very special to you. Leave some space after each name because there's a little more writing that you're going to do. You could think of your spouse, a kid, your cousins, your friends, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, siblings, an old friend. I don't know. I'm losing my train of thought on what I've said and what I haven't, but just anybody who comes to mind that's really special to you. And then if you're playing tug of war because you are thinking of, 4 people or something, you go ahead, do it for 4 people, or just know you can come back and do this for more people later. But for the sake of time, let's just keep it simple and pick 3. Go ahead and pause me if you need a second. Okay, so the next step is to jot down 3 memories that come to mind of the time shared with each person. So at the end of this, if you're doing 3 for each person, you should have 9 memories if you stuck with just the 3 people. So, gosh, just to give you some inspiration right off the bat, when I think of my grandparents, I think about their backyard or going up to their 40 acres in Gladwin, Michigan and playing in the creek trying to catch crayfish. Or with my husband, I think about what our life looked like when he lived in Windsor, Ontario, and I lived in Michigan. We spent so much time going through the Windsor-Detroit tunnel back and forth, Canada to the US and vice versa. And what that lifestyle, not so much at the tunnel, but what that lifestyle looked like in both countries, who we hung out with, all those things, or about the times shared going up to my family cabin with him. Man, I miss those days. That was before we had kids, and I swear all we did was watch movies, eat, have coffee, watch another movie, get a little sexy time in there, not gonna lie. And it was just, I miss those days. Let's put it that way. And then, oh man, with my mom, we would have these girls' weekends growing up. My dad would go on these hunting trips, and then she would always plan a really fun weekend for my little sister and I. Speaking of my little sister, I think of climbing trees with her or going to my uncle's house and catching bullfrogs, like so many things. So I've just spit out a whole bunch of memories. Go ahead and push the pause button to collect your own thoughts and just really let whatever comes to mind of time shared with each person come to the surface, jot them down, and come back when you're ready. All right, you still with me? The last phase of this is to now go back through each name and write down 2 attributes, characteristics, personality traits, mannerisms, anything that comes to mind about each person. I want you to really think what illuminates the vivid image in your mind when you see that person in your mind. So again, with some examples from my own life, when I think of my Papa Stan, I think of him in his chair in their breakfast nook. I think of him wearing overalls and having a plaid shirt on and his hair slicked back, that when he would be out working really hard in his garden and he'd come back in, he would sort of like fall down a bit. It honestly, when I watch Jack in This Is Us, I think of my grandpa's hair, even though my grandpa's hair was as white could be. And then for my husband, I think of his super sexy bearded jawline. I think of my mom in her denim jean jacket with Mickey Mouse on the back and a bottle of Diet Mountain Dew in hand. I think of how my dad almost always has a bag of pretzel M&Ms hiding somewhere in the house. I think of how my son tries to stuff so many cars and monster trucks in his backpack in the crying fit that he always has. I mean, it's just so predictable. When he tries to close up the zipper and he can't because it's so full, he just throws this big old fit like he's totally heartbroken. Or when I think of Kendall, one of the things that comes to mind is just her shape. I just love the shape of her. She's like this graceful little dancer. She actually almost always walks very lightly on her toes, not totally raised up, but just barely on her toes. And it's just the cutest thing ever. Everything about her is just the cutest thing. So those are just some ideas. Go ahead and hit the pause button to fill this out for yourself. Okay, the hard part's over. No more deep thinking on this stuff. The next step and the final step is to just go through from top to bottom and circle the things that you actually have pictures for. Bonus, if you are in some of the pictures of, especially the ones of the memories of times shared with each person, go ahead and do that as I am talking. I started doing this in 2014 as a way to convey what I was trying to do with my photography. And it was true for me, and it's true for so many people that go through this, that they don't have pictures of the stuff that's on their list. And the list is usually compiled of stuff that is really special and important and valued. I mean, would you agree, looking at that is some of your most precious thoughts about each person? I mean, for me, some of those experiences, especially the ones with my grandparents, since they've all passed away, I don't know. I wish that I had pictures of the stuff that was on my own list. And I found through going through this with so many people, hundreds of people throughout the years, that a lot of times the pictures that they do have don't necessarily align with the stories that they tell about those experiences. So for an example on that, Dave and I went on this road trip in 2008 to Las Vegas and back, basically, but we took two different routes. We started in Windsor, Ontario, and we got a ton of pictures. They're mostly the touristy kind with one of us or both of us in the frame, and there's a big, beautiful scene in the background. And there are definitely some just documented moments in there. But one story that really comes to mind is one night that we spent in Sedona, Arizona, at this campground that had this swiftly moving creek running through it. And it's to this day one of my favorite times spent with him. We stayed up pretty late. The time just flew by because the conversation was just flowing. And I don't know about you, but in your relationship, but there's also this side of the relationship where you're just comfortable in each other's silence. Like you can just be with each other and it's fine and that's okay. But on this particular night, we were so engaged in conversation, and I don't know, I felt really connected to him, and I don't have any pictures of that. And that is one story when I talk about that trip to my girlfriends that I would tell that story, like, oh my gosh, we had the best night. We talked about this and all this stuff, and I learned about this and so on and so on and so on. And another time during that trip, we started at this trailhead at the top of the Grand Canyon and hiked down, I think it was 9 or 11 miles to the campground, but we weren't sure if there was water there, like drinkable water. So Dave carried a bunch of water. We were young. I wasn't in the best of shape back then, but we just, I don't know, we were naive and thought that this would be a lot easier than what it was. And it was so brutal that we took so many breaks, especially me. And that would have been just really fun to have pictures of now, so I could look back and just laugh at how that trailhead just totally conquered us. That's for sure. That trail, I mean. So anyway, I don't have any pictures for any of those stories. So a lot of the stories that I tell, I don't have pictures of those things. So I came up with the quiz that you just did in 2014 as a way to convey what I was trying to do with pictures. Personally, I want pictures of the stuff that's on that list, but a lot of what's on that list is now a thing of the past. I can't go back. They're never going to happen again, especially the things with my grandparents. I mean, they've all passed away at this point. I hate that. I hate that feeling that there's nothing that I can do about it. Like I was saying in episode 1, I hate arriving to a certain point in time and thinking, damn, I really miss that. I wish I could revisit it. I wish that I would have been more mindful during that time. I wish for just one more. So in a nutshell, intentional documentary became a preventative measure, I guess, for a lack of a better term, to make pictures of the stuff like what's on your list. As a side note, if you found value in doing that quiz and you're a photographer in business, you can get the Reel is the New Perfect Photo Challenge, that's what it's technically called, in a really pretty PDF form right inside the Fearless and Framed shop. I will link to it in both the show notes and the mini mag. Just know that that quiz is filed with the U.S. Copyright Office, so you need to have the PDF in order to use it. You can send it to potential clients and clients that cannot be published online. This is how we protect the magic, as my lawyer would say. So, moving on, let's go a bit deeper. Simple pictures with big backstories. That's what intentional documentary is all about. Shonda Rhimes talks in her book Year of Yes about how we don't realize the importance of a moment until later. And here's a passage from the book where she's talking about that. And this moment is important. She doesn't know it. I don't know it. Not right now. Right now, this moment doesn't feel important at all. Right now, this moment feels like Thanksgiving morning and she's tired. I loved that. It made me just think about so much of what we talk about around here, how much we don't realize the importance of a moment until later, until it's gone, until it's over. And in this case, it's not that it's so much a memory of an experience where they, it's an experience that they're going to miss at some point. This was literally her sister telling her that she never says yes to anything, and it made this big shift in her life. But I just loved the idea of how often are we in this moment that we don't realize its significance until later. How often are we experiencing something that we're going to miss later on that we have the ability and the privilege to acknowledge today? So with intentional documentary, we're not mapping out the photography. We're not plotting, we're not planning, orchestrating, directing, mocking up a story, working off of a shot list, or directing in any way. In fact, it's the opposite. Instead, we're slowing down to acknowledge our values first before picking up the camera. And when we do that, a few things follow. I've got like a list of, 5 things here. So, number 1, we can still grab the firsts and the spontaneity of life. I'm not saying that we start just documenting all the things that we want to remember and it's this like sappy love fest for the most valued things in our life. I mean, those types of parts of our life are really valuable too, just like with what Shonda was saying, sometimes you don't realize something's significance until later. But what I am saying is that by slowing down and acknowledging our values first, we get to also notice more of what's reliable and predictable, which I don't know about you, but I think those are things that we just so easily overlook and dismiss because they're so familiar, I guess. Number 2, we get the privilege to make pictures of the type of stuff that was on your quiz list while it's still a living memory. Some of our highest valued thoughts were on that list, right? Number 3, use that acknowledgement as a way to notice more, to see more of our values. The more we notice, the more we notice. Photography aside, this mindfulness is a gift to feel abundant. So photography totally aside, I can testify that with intentional documentary, the more I looked for the things that I value, the more that I saw that I value, and it's shifted just how I see, which I'll get into in just a little bit. Number 4, we don't have to make pictures of everything, but more of what matters. Because we notice more of what we might want to remember, we get to collect our stories for safekeeping with our cameras or however you choose to document it. I mean, let's face it, you don't always have to document with your camera. But what we're specifically talking about first is just acknowledging our values. And then number 5, we give ourselves better ability to predict and anticipate all these things that are important to us. That predictability, that reliable thing that frequently happens, you know it's there, it's going to happen, whatever that is, because you've noticed it, now you've up-leveled, you've cranked up your volume to be able to predict and anticipate the moment. What's coming to mind is this picture from Ashley Manley. She is a brilliant photographer. I love following her work, and we featured her on the Fearless and Framed site a long time ago, pretty early on with Fearless and Framed, and shared this iconic photo of hers that was of her husband pouring her coffee in the morning. Because she acknowledged its importance, she made the picture. Like, she was mindful. She knew why she made the picture before she made the picture. And I don't know about you, but I think that's so beautiful. On the business side with intentional documentary, we're simply stepping away from this order taker workflow mode. And believe me, I've been there. And what I mean by that is this mentality of, okay, hi, Miss Inquiry, what can I do for you? What location? When? And then you go through your checklist of the things that you need before you shoot, like location, check, date, check, payment, check, check. and then you show up and record whatever happens in that time period. Now you can get some amazing moments and pictures in that, but what I'm saying is with intentional documentary, instead you're working in this chef mode. We get more background information on the clients up front and use their words to deliver on something they didn't even realize possible. They probably never would have thought to ask for otherwise. Your clients are not the professionals, you are. So here's an example. I did this session, I think it was in 2015, and it was an engagement session, like an engagement day in the life, basically. And at the end of the day, the couple invited her brother and her sister and their spouses over for dinner. And then they played this game called Celebrity in the living room, which is like a game where you act out stuff. It's not like a board game. And I mean, we don't even see that happen in an engagement or couples photography session like ever. But the reason that they decided to do that was because through the conversation and questions that I asked them up front, they realized that that's an important part of the season of life. They like to entertain their friends and family. That was such a familiar thing to them. So they decided, you know what, let's incorporate that into our time together. It was as simple as that. It was just, all they did was invite people over, and I had the camera present. It was really just that simple. But I mean, do you think that they really would have thought to look to include other people in their photos had we not gone through this process of acknowledging their values? So, like I said, your clients are not the professionals, you are. I'm sure we'll get into the how in this whole intentional documentary thing in a separate episode. I've got a whole class on the intentional documentary workflow process that I'll link to in the show notes, but the how isn't the point today. The point today is really the what, to really help you understand like what it is. And to sum it up, like I want to make sure that I have more pictures of the stuff that was on my quiz list for myself and for anybody else that I make pictures for. I just feel like it's that important. And I've learned that my people do too, whether it's the Fearless and Framed community, friends and family, people that I have met in the last couple of years. When I tell them about what I'm doing, they're like, I love that. I didn't even realize that that was something that I could do with hiring a photographer or even with their own camera. So I want to ask you this. Why do you really want pictures? What do they do for you? And when you can answer that and feel really confident in that, know that that's what you're really selling. I still have my moments where I see from a place of lack. There's lots of things that I want, lots of dreams and ambition over here. Believe me, I see lots of flaws in my house. I see so many things that I want to improve and fix and do. But mostly today, I see through this value filter. I think it's part camera, part intuition, and it's totally through intentional documentary. I've started to see my life through a value filter. It's like when you think of a red car and then you start to see the red car out and about, like you see tons of them. In this case right now, I just decided recently, my next car, I want it to be a 4-door Jeep Wrangler, and now I've started to see them all over the place. And when you start to do that with your values, the more you notice. And if you're in the thick of life, which we all are, me included, your whole being can be in this living forward mode. And if you want this more content lifestyle, intentional documentary, it's just a tool to help you get there. But it's not just something for you. It's something that you can offer your clients if you're a photographer in business. Another quote that I love, you may have seen me share this on Fearless and Framed recently. In my experience, Kevin, there's no such thing as a long time ago. There's only memories that mean something and the memories that don't. Sylvester Stallone said that in season 1 of the show, This Is Us. We can't predict which bucket each moment will fall into, but the best chance to make sure that we fully experience and recognize a moment or a story for what it is to practice mindfulness, identify your value triggers, and give a nod to the value by making a picture or documenting it in some way, shape, or form. This, to me, is the greatest way to actionably honor the ones we love, to really see them and our relationship with them and make the choice to say, this experience or you are important enough to preserve, because one day when life changes, as it always does, this picture will be a just one more for us. Fuzzy and forget defense, memory insurance, that's what intentional documentary is. I really wish we could have a two-way conversation right now just to hear your thoughts on all of this stuff and chat about it. If you want to chat with me more, you can go to our Facebook group. It's Intentional Documentary Podcast.club and hit request to join. I'll add you in there and then we can continue the conversation in there. But I want to move into presence versus mindfulness. When I think of being present, I feel like that's a pretty common message that we're hearing. I mean, do you hear that a lot? I feel like I hear it all the time. Be more present. Be present. Oh boy. To me, that means putting away the phone, just turning off all distractions and being fully into playing with my kids and giving them 100% of my attention, for example. Or same thing if I'm out on a date with Dave, instead of scrolling my phone when I'm in the passenger seat, just being present with him, even if we're not talking, just being there. But how beautiful is it to emerge out of total presence, to feel and acknowledge this is important. And to me, that's mindfulness. As opposed to arriving in the future to feel, how did we get here? When was the last time we did this? I mean, how many stories have we forgotten from not realizing the moment in the moment? My husband, he brings up several just small micro stories about our kids all the time. And I'm like, whoa, I forgot about that. Please tell me I'm not the only one. So there's sometimes this lack of closure when you realize you've lost something incredibly valuable. And I hate that. I've got an example for you. And I don't think I've ever shared this story before, but it has to do with my friend Alicia. She and I were inseparable. She got me into cheerleading in high school. We would almost always be over at each other's houses. Her family was my family was her family. We'd have sleepovers. We did driver's training together. That was really fun. We went through all the boy experiences together. We shared our Sweet 16 birthday together because our birthdays were less than a month apart. And one thing about her is she had diabetes. Alicia was always this light of happiness and silliness. And I can see her facial expressions when she was just trying to rile you up and make you laugh and be silly. She liked to entertain. She liked to bring joy to any situation that she was in. She was always thoughtful. This one time for my birthday in high school, she got not just my favorite candy bar back then was a Milky Way candy bar. And she brought me not just one, but she brought an entire case, like an entire box of Milky Ways. And that was like the paperweight to this big giant balloon that said happy birthday. For my 17th birthday, I think that was. So in our last year of high school, towards the end, I really didn't like who she was hanging out with. I didn't like some of the things that she was doing. I ran into her in a parking lot after we graduated, and she was with some of the people she had been hanging out with. I was with another one of my friends. And of course, I knew the people that she was with, and they were all like, hi, hi, hi. And I totally ignored her. I gave her the silent treatment. I mean, we hurt the ones that we love the most, right? And I was only 17. Looking back now, I was so hurt at the changes that she was making. And I think what it really was that I felt the shift in our friendship. I felt like a smaller part of her I felt like a smaller part of her life at that point in time. And maybe it was a little bit of jealousy. I don't really know. But the way that I treated her was just not very nice. And it was New Year's when I received a call. So this was like months later. I received a call that she was in the hospital, not doing well. And it was not exactly the diabetes, but that is what triggered it. And I really, at first, I just rolled my eyes at the thought. I thought, maybe she'll actually take care of herself after all of this, because the girl, she really liked her sugary stuff. I remember many a times getting ice cream with her and her drinking Mountain Dew when she shouldn't have had so much sugar. But I think it was kind of like when Veda was told about Thomas J. getting stung by bees in the movie My Girl. Do you remember that? If I can find this scene, I'll link to it in the mini mag in the show notes. But Veda didn't understand at first when her dad sat her down and was like, Thomas J. was stung, or what happened? He said, I don't remember exactly the line that he said, but she was like, I told him not to tease those bees. Did he get stung? Maybe I should go over and yell at him. Like I kind of had this Veda moment going on, and really I was just in denial that there was something really wrong here. And a few days later, at the top of 2004, she was gone. And she didn't exactly pass from the diabetes, but that's not my story to tell here. All those experiences, the sleepovers, the 7-Eleven slushies that we'd go get, and the subway runs before the games that we would cheer at, all the things that I expected to happen again and again were gone when she was gone. And I'd like to believe that if I'd known it was the last time, when it was the last time, I would have acted differently. Not in a sad, sappy, gloom and doom type of a way. I'm not saying like I want to go around being like, oh, we've got to, like, this is so precious. This time is so precious, and just be in this like have this big sap fest all the time. But I believe that had I really treated that moment with those stories and those moments with the respect that I would give them today, that maybe in those moments I would have felt a little more love and actually documented them. Because 14 years later, I've got pictures and I have the memories, because like all of this just feels like a fresh wound. I think maybe out of guilt of how I treated her at the end of our friendship, I guess. But man, I would love more. The pictures that I have don't represent the memories that I have, nothing that I've shared in here. And I would love to see my stories and mental pictures on the outside of my body. I'd love to hear her voice again. And I haven't experienced another close death since I started Intentional Documentary in late 2013, but I have experienced a big life change recently, which was moving. I know, that's apples and oranges. They really don't compare. But there is a moral to this story, I promise. At the decision to move, I felt this sadness and fear in my gut. I'm sure it was like a little bit of grief over the changes of the things that we would leave behind, really. Because I loved our home and I loved our life in Michigan. But because of Intentional Documentary, I was inspired to go around and make pictures of my old elementary school and the crosswalk, of our town, of different things with my friends and family that we experienced in those last 6 weeks from that decision before we left. I went to my parents' house and made pictures of things on the inside of their house that just say or speak home to me. So many things that are iconic to me in my brain, I intentionally went out and made a picture of that while I could. I collected all the living memories into pictures, and it felt really good. I felt connected to the stuff that really matters, and in some small way, it helped me feel like really alive. That connection, I really do. I think that like a lot of connection makes you feel more alive. So I don't look at those pictures regularly. They're not something like that I'm like, oh, remember when, like every day of my life, but I have them. And that feels good. It feels like my values are safe. So even if something burns down tomorrow or something, like I have this picture that is in the way that I remember it. And that is, to me, that's everything. So you might be wondering, can I do this with clients though? I mean, of course it makes sense to preserve all the things in my life, but how do I do that for clients? And again, probably go deeper in the how in a different episode, but the short answer is yes. All you have to do is inspire your clients to look deeper. It is a deeper conversation up front. It takes a bit more time, and you might feel a little bit of resistance from them up front, but once you get them to the other side, they love it. And that's honestly why you should pay attention to intentional documentary if you are a photographer in business. I mean, definitely pay attention to it just for yourself for all the reasons that I've shared in here. But as a business owner, after the experience, your clients, I can promise you, they will agree that they didn't even know that they needed this. But they're so glad that you were the chef and you took the experience deeper. Remember, you are the professional here, not your clients. They will sing your praises for having them look at their own life through a truer lens than they were looking at before they came into contact with you. Give clients the picture experience that you enjoy experiencing yourself. So I'm going to leave you with this one final question. What purpose do pictures serve in your life today? What purpose do you want them to serve in 20 years from now, 50 years from now? Come on and tell me inside of our group at intentionaldocumentarypodcast.club. I would love to continue this conversation over there. And until then, I'll talk to you next time. Thank you to our podcast team for making the Intentional Documentary podcast possible. Our sound editor, Lucy Burgess, Minimag designer, Jillian Adriana, and our show notes manager, Ebony Rivera. Special thank you to our episode guests for openly sharing their insight, and thank you for listening, of course. Please hit the review tab to leave a rating. I'd love to read about your favorite episodes and what has really clicked for you. And remember, the only way to approach your photography is through your lens, your way. Photograph freely, and I'll see you next time. Visit fearlessandframed.com/intentional documentary podcast for this episode and all past episodes, show notes, and mini mags.